This January 1st marks 62 years since the triumph of the Cuban Revolution as the country prepares for a major transformation of its economy. Peruvian President Francisco Sagasti has convened a forum to reach a national agreement in the midst of the crisis resulting from the police killing of 2 protesting agricultural sector workers. Hundreds of people took to the streets of the Iraqi capital this Friday to demand the expulsion of United States forces from the country. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. This January 1st marks 62 years since the triumph of the Cuban Revolution led by Fidel Castro, which overthrew dictator Fulgencio Batista. The revolutionary movement transformed the relations of submission to the United States and developed models of free health and education which have not only benefited Cuba but much of the world, as the country has shared its experiences and personnel with many others as part of its internationalist principles of solidarity and the relentless struggle against injustice. In the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, Cuba continues to show this same solidarity with other nations, sending medical missions to assist the fight against this new enemy. And despite the inhumane sanctions imposed by the US government, the Cuban Revolution stands fast as its scientific efforts continue in the development of vaccines and drugs to defeat the novel coronavirus. And this January 1st marks day zero for Cuba in the major restructuring process of its economy as its dual currency system is gradually eliminated and wages increase fivefold. The plan promoted by the Cuban government will mean the unification of the current exchange rates, an end to the circulation of the Cuban convertible peso, and the implementation of a comprehensive reform of salaries and prices with the gradual elimination of excessive subsidies. The process, defined by the authorities as interdisciplinary and cross-cutting, seeks to resolve macroeconomic imbalances, reduce deficits, encourage production, and improve efficiency and competitiveness at the international level. The president of Cuba's Biotechnology and Pharmaceutical Industries Group, Eduardo Martinez, offered an interview on the challenges faced by the industry in 2021 and the progress made in the development of 4 Cuban vaccine candidates against COVID-19.
Right now, we have 4 vaccines in clinical trials, which does not mean we are not working on other vaccine candidates. As we have said before, and as is being demonstrated now with the emergence of new variants of the virus, we must be prepared for the possibility that the current vaccines we are working on do not protect against the new strains of the virus. We must have the capacity to include new antigens in the vaccine, and we are working on that. We believe that by the end of the first quarter, we could be ready to vaccinate using an emergency badge, as has been done in other countries, where once the regulatory authority results are presented, we are hoping to have an emergency badge ready to begin vaccinating all the at-risk personnel, that is, our doctors who are in the front line, the entire health staff in general, and the entire country, a country where tourism is an important activity, so we also plan to vaccinate all airport staff and staff working at hotels. This would provide confidence for tourists, as the people they will interact with will be protected.
The government of the United States imposed new coercive measures against Cuba's main international bank this Friday with the purpose of economically strangling the country. The U.S. Treasury Department announced the inclusion of Cuba's Banco Financiero Internacional S.A., the country's main international bank, on its sanctions list for supposedly disproportionately benefiting the Cuban military. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced the move in a statement issued Friday, which represents further escalation of pressure on Cuba before outgoing U.S. President Donald Trump hands over power to President-elect Joe Biden. The measure comes shortly after the Cuban government approved a series of resolutions aimed at favouring imports and exports by the non-state sector, in which the financial institution plays an important role. And the high priest of the Afro-Cuban religion known as Santeria revealed a group of predictions popularly known as the Letter of the Year in the early hours of this January 1st, which many Cubans consider to contain important advice for the year ahead. In their annual prophecy, the priests, known as Babalaos, announced that 2020 would be under the divinity of one of the most respected and mysterious deities of Santeria, Olokun, accompanied by Oshun, the goddess of love and fertility. Among the events of interest, the priests prophesies an increase in natural disasters, migratory flows, and the incompliance with and cancelling of treaties. They also recommend maintaining the existing hygienic and sanitary measures, undergoing periodic medical checkups, and maintaining respect with within marriage to avoid breakups, while calling on the family to instill respect, education and love for work. Colombia has registered over 16,300 new COVID-19 cases and 304 deaths in the last 24 hours. The figure represents a record number of daily confirmed infections in the country. On announcing the figures, the Health Ministry called on the population to take care and follow guidelines to prevent infections. Health authorities pointed out that the new cases were reported in the capital, Bogota, as well as 6 other departments of the country. According to official data, Colombia has reported a total of over 1.6 million COVID-19 cases to rank 11th in the world and 2nd in South America, and over 43,000 deaths. And Colombians began the new year faced with a second increase in fuel prices in less than 2 weeks. The price increase, which came into force this Friday and has been questioned by much of the population, will be implemented in the 13 main cities of the country with an increase of 0.031 cents of the dollar per litre of gasoline. Meanwhile, the price of diesel will increase by 0.036 cents of the dollar. The Ministry of Mines and Energy explained that the new fuel rate is due to the rise in international gasoline and diesel prices. Peruvian President Francisco Sagasti has called for a national agreement in the midst of the crisis resulting from the violent police repression of protesting agricultural sector workers, which resulted in the deaths of 2 people. The decision to convene a forum to draw up a national agreement based on discussions regarding the future of the agricultural sector and other measures was announced by President Sagasti as agricultural workers continue to mobilise and block the Pan American Highway to protest the legislation recently passed by lawmakers, which they say only benefits big agricultural export companies and fails to meet their demands for better wages and working conditions. In addition, they've also demanded the release of those arrested during the clashes with police. It's expected that the academic sector and different political parties will participate in the announced talks. And the Peruvian Interior Minister, José Elis, announced that radical measures will be taken to reform the national police after 2 people lost their lives at the hands of officers during the protests against the new agricultural legislation. The statements came in response to photographic evidence showing a policeman firing a gun at protesters. The minister stressed that the incident will be investigated. Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez announced that the country will resume its radical quarantine program known as the 7+7 method due to a rise in coronavirus cases. The Vice President informed of the decision through her Twitter account, noting that the measure will come into effect from next Monday, January 4th, and last until Sunday 10th, in response to the epidemiological situation at the end of December. Although the Presidential Commission for the Control and Prevention of COVID-19 reported that over 107,000 patients have recovered from the coronavirus, it noted that the country registered the highest number of people infected during the last 2 weeks, with 437 new cases confirmed in the last 24 hours. Brazilian authorities have detected the country's first 2 cases of a new strain of the novel coronavirus. The new variant was originally identified in the United Kingdom. Brazil remains the South American country most affected by the pandemic and ranks 3rd in the world in terms of the number of confirmed cases. The 2 identified patients are residents of Sao Paulo, who are believed to have been infected abroad. The country's Adolfo Lutz Institute is undertaking research to establish the genetic sequence of the strain, which is believed to be 70% more contagious. Brazil has reported more than 7.6 million COVID-19 cases and over 195,000 deaths. This Friday marks the 20th anniversary of the entry into force of the Monetary Integration Act in El Salvador, which paved the way to the dollarization of the economy. Despite promises of macroeconomic stability, 20 years after dollarization, the country still has a high public debt, equivalent to 89.7% of GDP, according to estimates by the Salvadoran Foundation for Economic and Social Development. Experts have noted that the COVID-19 pandemic has aggravated the situation in a country where public debt has increased by more than 18%. Analysts also explained that Salvadoran monetary policy depends on the US Federal Reserve, which means the national government does not have the capacity to react to an economic crisis. US prosecutors in the case against the 4 Minneapolis police officers charged with the death of George Floyd have requested that the trial be delayed by 3 months, citing the risk posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Prosecutors argued that the trial, scheduled for March 8th, should be delayed until June 7th to allow enough time for people involved to be vaccinated and the overall health risk to be sufficiently diminished. The now fired police officers were charged in the death of Floyd on May 25th when he was forcibly detained and pinned down on a South Minneapolis street corner, sparking protests that further fueled the Black Lives Matter movement, both in the United States and beyond. According to the real-time tally by Johns Hopkins University, the United States has now surpassed 20 million COVID-19 cases. The US has also registered over 346,000 deaths, making it the country with by far the highest official number of cases and the highest death toll in the world. On Wednesday alone, more than 3,900 people died of COVID-19 related complications in the country, representing a new daily record. And experts believe the worst is yet to come, as healthcare workers brace for a surge in cases and deaths after holiday gatherings. More than 125,000 people are currently hospitalized with the coronavirus, which is another record figure. While a mass vaccination campaign has begun, the number of people who have received the jab so far, nearly 2.8 million, is far behind the 20 million inoculations that the Trump administration promised by the end of the year. On the first day of 2021, residents of the Chinese city of Wuhan, which became known worldwide as the first epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic, expressed their gratefulness for the measures that successfully contained the spread of the virus, as well as their hopes that all countries can overcome the health crisis in the new year.
The year 2020 was a painful year for all mankind, because COVID-19 is a worldwide epidemic and global economic, social and cultural activities have declined considerably compared with previous years. It's a painful year for everyone. Now, many countries are developing vaccines, so I hope everyone can be vaccinated as soon as possible so we can get through this pandemic. I am very grateful for China's strength in bringing the epidemic under control as soon as possible. I also wish the pandemic in other countries and regions could be brought under control as soon as possible and people will be well soon. In my view, China has basically got the epidemic under control, but there are some countries that are still seriously affected, such as the United States, as well as some countries in Europe and South America. But I think in 2021, people must have confidence. The whole world is connected. It is the global village. People from different countries, ethnicities and cultures should join hands, and 2021 will be a better year.
The start of the new year marked the end of the so-called transition period after the United Kingdom's departure from the European Union 11 months ago, representing the biggest single economic change the country has experienced since World War II.
I think it's a disaster, among many disasters this year. Yeah, it's a crappy deal, and yeah, don't really see any positives in it, to be honest.
I think this is a problem. This is a problem for United Kingdom, Great Britain economy, because the delivery of the goods from Europe maybe something restrictions, something. I think this is a problem because delivery is not so good. Can go to the United Kingdom.
Hundreds of people took to the streets of the Iraqi capital this Friday to demand the expulsion of the United States forces from the country. The supporters of the Hashid al-Shabi, or Popular Mobilization Forces, a state-sponsored umbrella organization composed of some 40 armed groups, carried portraits of Iraqi commander Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis and Iranian Revolutionary Guards commander Qasem Soleimani during a demonstration in Baghdad's western Sharala neighborhood ahead of the January 3rd anniversary of the US drone strike that killed the two commanders. Iraq's parliament voted to expel US troops from the country at the beginning of 2020 following their assassinations. The Trump administration has withdrawn some of its troops, but some 2,500 remain. Muslims and Christians living in a camp for internally displaced people in northeastern Nigeria came together to pray for peace in 2021 and spoke of their hopes to return to their home communities.
Our president should please help and resettle us back to our community so that we can pick up the pieces of our lives there. A situation as an IDP is indeed very unfortunate, but anyway, if my people will receive help, then I am satisfied. May God Almighty bring all those that are involved in these atrocities to the right path in Jesus' name.
I have a dream that one day we will be back to our community, and by the grace of God we shall be there.
Israeli troops attacked Palestinians on Friday as hundreds protested the establishment of a settler outpost in the occupied West Bank. The soldiers fired tear gas and rubber bullets at the demonstrators who gathered outside the West Bank village of Deir Harir near Ramallah.
We are here because the settlers and the army are swallowing the land and getting closer and closer. These lands that they swallowed up are from the root of this country, so we came here to resist this occupation and stop it. This generation, these lions, are coming to teach this aggressor a lesson in resistance, God willing.
In India, farm workers have now been mobilised for a month to protest 3 new agricultural sector laws promoted by the government. During the past 30 days, agricultural workers have marched to the capital, New Delhi, blocking major highways into and out of the city. The peaceful protests have been met with repression by security forces. The protesters are demanding the withdrawal of the reforms, which they stress threaten the country's food sovereignty as well as their livelihoods. Union and sector representatives are currently participating in the 6th round of talks with the government to seek a solution to the ongoing dispute. Military personnel in Bosnia-Herzegovina began setting up tents on Friday to house hundreds of asylum seekers stranded at a burnt-out camp amid freezing winter conditions. 150 army personnel brought in equipment to set up the makeshift accommodation at Camp Lipa, which is located near the country's border with Croatia. The tents will be operated by the International Organization for Migration. The country's faced international criticism for leaving some 1,000 asylum seekers without shelter after a fire engulfed the squalid refugee camp where they were living in December. Bosnia-Herzegovina has struggled with a recent influx of thousands of people fleeing war and poverty in their countries in the Middle East, Africa and Asia.
The problem of no humanity. Just food is not enough. Like showering, like accommodations, beds, mattress. Mostly people are diseases, you know better, like corona. Some people are itches, blood is so hot. No have humanity, just no have humanity.
Today we will stay hungry, okay? We don't mind. We can adjust it. We can drink water. That's enough for us. But the problem is, main problem for us, we need the containers, okay?
8 young men and women died during a New Year's Eve celebration in a cottage in southwest Bosnia from suspected carbon monoxide poisoning.
At the site, we found 8 young people, all dead, 4 males and 4 females. They were all born in 2001, 2002 and 2003. An investigation by our police force is underway and it's led by the cantonal prosecutors from Siroki, Brijek. Most probably, the cause of death is suffocation, but we will know more once the investigation is over. It is a tragedy that will mark this year, tragedy that will forever stay in the hearts of the families of those who died. Personally, I cannot imagine anything worse and more tragic than the loss of children in such a tragedy. We are here to help as much as we can and to express our condolences to the families who lost their children in this tragedy. We are praying together with them.
And we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss and thank you for watching.